of those dear hearts and gentle people.
Hello and welcome to another WolfWare review. I'm Sam, and today I'll be reviewing Fallout 4 by Bethesda Softworks. I'm almost certain that everybody that even gives a passing glance to video games and video game news has seen something about this game. I would go so far as to say that this is the monolithic release of this year. The question is, after 7 years of waiting after Fallout 3 and 5 after New Vegas, how does Fallout 4 stack up as a new release? This review will be split into gameplay, graphics, sound, and story, with an extra stuff section if there's something that I want to talk about that may not be completely related to the game itself. All that being said, let's get this show on the road. In Fallout 4, you play as the sole survivor of Vault 111, and you are on a quest to find the remnants of your family in the location of the Institute, a shadowy organization that has been deploying synths all throughout the Commonwealth. In the simplest of terms, the gameplay as a whole is a drastic improvement to the gameplay of New Vegas and Fallout 3. The gunplay is fantastic, and much better implemented than it was in Fallout 3 or New Vegas. At least now, aiming down your sights is actually accurate. VATS is still as useful as it was in the previous 2 iterations of Fallout, sometimes being your savior in a sticky situation. Along with the improvements is the implementation of gun mods. Gun mods were in New Vegas, but I don't ever recall being particularly inclined to make or use them. In Fallout 4, there's a wide range of modifications for each gun, and a very small collection of mods you can make for melee weaponry. I would like for there to have been more options for the melee weapons, but as there are more guns, I can understand the amount of effort put into the numerous modifications. Another addition are legendary enemies. These enemies take more damage and drop better loot. Sometimes the loot they drop can be pretty game-breaking, but that complaint isn't so big. One complaint I do have is that the higher level you get, the more the legendary armor becomes kinda useless. Once you reach that point, the legendaries that you can't use can make you a decent amount of caps. Speaking of caps, the barter system is largely the same as all the other Fallouts. There is also a settlement building mechanic, where you can supply your settlers with food and water and build nice buildings for you and your settlers. In the end though, this mechanic is rather poorly implemented. It is very unclear what affects settler happiness besides food, water, and defense. And the actual building mode is so janky that it's a wonder people have been able to make half of the things that they have. From what I understand, if you are on PC, mods are already helping with this. A couple of the other big changes are the voice protagonist and the elimination of skills. The voice protagonist is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, I find myself a lot more invested in actually hearing the conversations, as opposed to skipping through the dialogues, since I usually read the subtitles faster than the voice actor says them. But it seems as though this has limited the amount of dialogue options as a whole. I very much miss being able to use my different stats to influence my options in a conversation. Now, the only special skill that matters is charisma when talking about speech checks. Since I'm talking about the special skills, I'll talk about how there are no more perks. In the previous couple iterations of Fallout, when you leveled up, you would get points that you can dump into any skill of your choosing. Among those skills were speech, repair, small guns, barter, medicine, and many others. You would then choose a perk that was unlocked based on your base special stats and the amount of points you put into a skill. Now, when you level up, you are put directly at the perk screen, where you can dump a point into one of your base special stats, or put a point into one of the perks available to you based on your level and the amount of points in a certain special stat. It's a very simple system and it works pretty well, I think. Though, in an interesting companionship, the lack of speech options in this new perk system seem to have given your character less of a personal touch. Your character is the sole survivor, not you. Which, you decide whether that's good or bad, but personally I think Fallout 4 seems to play a lot less like an RPG this time around. Oh, and one last thing that I forgot to mention. Another change that was made was the removal of repairing items. Weapons and armor no longer break, except for power armor. That still breaks and you still do need to repair it. In New Vegas and Fallout 3, you would constantly be carrying around extras of your armor and favorite weapons to repair them so that your weapons wouldn't become slower or do less damage, and so your armor wouldn't become useless. Some found this mechanic immersive and helpful as an RPG mechanic, but I honestly just found it tedious. All in all, the majority of the changes to gameplay I think are improvements more than anything, with the voice protagonist being a little iffy, the settlements seeming a bit poorly implemented, and the removal of the skill system taking away a personal touch. So, one of the biggest conversations about Fallout 4 pre-release was the graphical quality. While there were many people complaining that they didn't look good to them, I think the general consensus was that they were okay. Once again, I'll say that I'm not that big on graphics, but I have to immediately say that I think this game is very pleasing to the eyes. Expanding the color palette from the green of Fallout 3 and the orange of New Vegas is a huge improvement. This game has a lot of color and it certainly helps the feeling of the world as a whole. The animations are very smooth and gives the whole game a very fluid feeling. The game runs at 30 frames per second with occasional drops when there are a lot of enemies on screen. Other reviewers may say that Fallout 4's graphics are complete shite, though I think they may be blowing it out of proportion. Overall, the graphics are very nice. As is the case with the previous Fallouts, the original score for this is amazing, and I sometimes find myself waiting at the main menu just to get all the way through the main theme. As for the radio stations, there's a lot of returning music from Fallout 3, and plenty of new tracks. That being said, much like Fallout 3, the songs will get old very fast, and you might just find yourself shutting off the radio and just listening to the regular music. I mentioned the voice protagonists earlier, and I must say that the voice acting seems to vary wildly in quality. Sometimes it's spot on, but other times it seems very dry in delivery or even forced. I'm speaking specifically for the male voice actor since I haven't even played as the female character, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. The sound is good, but if we're gonna take a hit in the conversation options in future Fallouts, I hope that next time the voice acting is better. This story is decent for what it is. The further you get into it, the more morally gray things get with each of the three major factions in the Commonwealth. These three factions are the Brotherhood of Steel, the Railroad, and the Institute. Each of them have their benefits and each have their drawbacks. I find myself with a very large lack of things to actually say about the main story as a whole. It feels as though the main story has only been a fraction of my 140-hour playtime. The small stories that you find through exploring are amazing and bring a lot of life to the bombed-out husk of Boston. Along with that, the singular stories of the towns and companions you have are amazing. And though I say that, I think they're really just good, and they could have been better. It would have been nice if there was a bit more unique factors to the vendors and people living in the big settlements. There are other places like the combat zone and the robot racetrack that could have been great places for unique quests, but fell to the same shoot everything mechanic that seems to be prevalent in this game. As soon as you enter these places, everyone is immediately hostile, no chance for conversations. The side quests are a shining example of lovely storytelling in the game, but the main storyline itself is rather uninspired, but I'll get to that later. One more positive note is that the Raiders seem to be more than simple killing machines. They seem to be little characters of their own now, which is pretty refreshing. That being said, I wish there was more options to interfacing with them than murdering them. The vaults in previous games all felt like their own self-contained horror stories, with their experiments being fleshed out through terminals and experiences in the vaults themselves. There are only 5 vaults in Fallout 4, and only 2 of them are completely fleshed out, and that's including the one you leave in the beginning. Though, there are some vague details for some of the vaults that are revealed through terminals within said vaults, and in the Vault-Tec Regional HQ, so there is still some investigation that you can do yourself. There are so many chances for amazing things that seem to be passed by for a simple motif of kill everything. There's also a lack of options to be completely bad. I'm happy with the removal of the karma system, since it could be so easily exploited, and made things pretty black and white, but this alternative of only having the option of good or snarky good isn't the best thing ever. And as is the normal case with Bethesda games, the titles you receive are largely unearned and relatively useless. At least for the most morally good faction, the Minutemen it is. The Minutemen promote you to general of them in essentially the first couple of quests, but you find yourself being ordered around more often than not. One of the things I like are the moral gray area that all of the factions, besides the Minutemen, seem to exist in. The Brotherhood of Steel, very much removed from how they were in Fallout 3, is under new leadership and is a bit more xenophobic. But they make a good point in saying that the Institute's technology is dangerous. The Railroad wants to save all the synths, even at the cost of more human lives. The Institute says they want to help humanity, but keep sentient beings as slaves and kidnap humans in settlements. Even the Minutemen are a little gray. While it is the Commonwealth protecting itself, once their leader dies, they are bound to repeat their history, splitting up and becoming bands of raiders and scavengers. Huge warning! Spoilers for the main story ahead! The story for your character, however, is very lackluster. You leave the vault searching for your kid, and while searching for the Institute itself is very exciting, when you finally find the Institute with the aid of either the Minutemen, the Brotherhood, or the Railroad, you find your son, though he is very much aged in comparison to what you had thought. He's the leader of the Institute and wants you to take his place. The quests that follow have you deciding which faction you want to side with. Any of the main 3 you choose have you destroying the other 2, which seems like such a waste, but it is what the story dictates. I was mildly upset after the fact that I didn't have very much of an option. I was hoping that if my intelligence or charisma was high enough, I could convince them to coexist in some way. There is a Minuteman ending as well, but that didn't really appeal to me either. So, to wrap this section up, I'll say that it could have been so much more. I said a little earlier that there is so much missed opportunity in the locations and decisions. While there is no shortage to the little stories that can be discovered and breathe life into this world, there's a lot of room for improvement. I hope that future DLC improves upon this situation, but I wish that it could have been better first thing. Bethesda isn't particularly known for their stellar storytelling, but it doesn't excuse what I feel is a lack of options and a lack of effort put into genuinely interesting locations. And before I jump to my conclusion, as it were, here's some extra stuff. We all heard about the rush to get pre-orders for the Pip-Boy edition. I got one and I think it's a very nice display item. There are a lot of people that express disappointment over it being made out of plastic and not metal, but I'm sure these people don't understand how much metal costs to mass manufacture. You basically paid an extra $60 for it, not an extra $200. Anyways, the steel book it came in is very nice, as is the poster that comes in the case. I like everything about this Pip-Boy edition, and it's inspired me to get the Fallout 3 Collector's Edition. I also wanted to include something that I think is another interesting consequence to the voice protagonist. It makes the game a lot more watchable, for lack of a better term. What I mean by that is that it seems that people are just able to watch other people play it a lot easier. With Fallout 3 in New Vegas, if you had a good commentator, you were set and it kept the game watchable, but with Fallout 4 you can just play the game and people will be able to understand what's happening. I also find myself asking if this will inspire others to go and play the previous couple of iterations of Fallout, because it certainly created an urge to do that for me. So, does Fallout 4 stack up to its previous counterparts? I wouldn't say it particularly does. The setting is superb and the colors have brought new life to the Fallout series, not that it needed revival. The gameplay is fantastic, and while the story and interactions may feel pretty slim, it is still a fun quest to romp through. Even after my 140 hours of Fallout 4, the question of whether or not it was better than its predecessors was still stuck in my head. This led to me going back to Fallout 3 in New Vegas so I could give my comparisons with a bit more clarity instead of talking through rose-colored glasses. And boy, replaying these two made me realize the dense amount of quests. The location to quest ratio was pretty equal. There were so many quests and so many ways in which to tackle them. Though I mentioned the perk system as an improvement earlier, I meant it more in the sense as an improvement towards the more streamlined gameplay that Fallout 4 goes for. The skill system adds so much more personality to your character, because your character is yours, and you can do different things depending on how you specialized yourself. The importance of the speech and barter skills to me in my New Vegas run was ridiculous. The gameplay may be a bit worse for wear as time goes on, but my keenness to continue my adventures shine through. It makes me question whether I kept going through Fallout 4 because its gameplay was really nice, or because I was actually invested in the adventure I was on. Even if it was one or the other, which is truly better. In the end, Fallout 4 fails to live up to its counterparts, or at least New Vegas is truly immersive world, but the gameplay, minus the lack of speech options and removal of the skill system, is far improved. I'd say if you were to grade it on a scale of Fallout games, it would fall somewhere in between Fallout 3 and New Vegas. Allow me to take this time to mention that that scale is completely arbitrary. Also recognize that the original few Fallout games aren't on that scale. That's because they are completely different beasts altogether. Fallout 4 is a great game, but whether or not it is a great Fallout game may be left up to the future DLC releases. From the floating fortress of the Prydwen to the depths of Vault 111, this game will keep you enthralled for hours. In my opinion, it's well worth the price of admission. If you decide to grab it, sit back, relax, and enjoy the colorful, wonderful, and sometimes terrifying Commonwealth. You're in for a good time, crashing bandit camps, blowing up super mutants, and hunting feral ghouls. Hey, thanks for watching all the way through, I really appreciate it. If you like this review, check out our other game reviews, or our system review for the Nintendo GameCube. If that isn't your cup of tea, you might like our opinion corner for Sony's Future of Gaming, or West Wednesdays, or kinda sorta Let's Play deal. If you like this video, hit the like button so we know what you want to see more of. If you have some criticisms, throw them in the comments section, and if you want our content on a semi-regular basis, hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next WolfWare review.